The lunch rush had just ended at the Milky Way diner. Kara Summers wiped down the metal counter with practiced motions. The diner sat near the main promenade of Outpost Station 7, a busy hub where ships from across human space stopped to refuel and resupply. Kara tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear. Her blue uniform had a small coffee stain near the pocket, but it was mostly clean. 6 years of serving food to travelers, workers, and soldiers had taught her how to stay somewhat presentable even during the busiest shifts. "Order up for table 5, called George Miller from the kitchen window. George owned the diner and did most of the cooking himself. Kara loaded the plates onto her tray, 2 standard earth burgers with fries and a bowl of soup made from vegetables grown in the station's hydroponic gardens. She balanced the tray on her shoulder and weaved between the tables. "Here you go, folks," she said, setting the food down for the pair of engineers who spent their lunch breaks at table 5 almost every day. "Can I get you anything else?" "This looks great, Kara," said the older engineer, Steve Jackson. "Any news about the Acrelian ship that docked this morning?" Kara's smile stayed in place, but something flashed behind her eyes. "I haven't heard much, just that they're here for emergency repairs. Big diplomatic delegation from what people are saying." The younger engineer, Beth Harris, snorted. "Those stuck-up lizards. Did you hear how they spoke to the docking crew? Like they were talking to animals." "Careful," Steve warned. "Walls have ears on space stations." He glanced around nervously. Kara nodded politely and moved back toward the counter. As she walked, her mind wasn't on orders or tips. It was on the Acrelians. She knew more about them than anyone on this station might guess. Their complex social hierarchy, their 16 dialects, the meaning behind the colored markings on their scales, their ancient poetry that few humans had ever heard, let alone understood. Once she had been the most promising student at the Galactic Diplomatic Academy, specializing in Acrelian relations, top of her class, until everything fell apart. The diner's door slid open with a soft hiss. George came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His eyes widened. "Kara," he whispered urgently. Station Administrator Pierce just walked in with some officials. She turned to see Alan Pierce, a nervous man in a crisp uniform, accompanied by Lieutenant Samantha Wright from Station Security, and Peter Doyle, the chief engineer. Their faces looked tense. "George," Pierce said, ignoring Kara completely. "We need to book your diner for a private event, immediately." George frowned. "What's going on, Alan? I've got regular customers who count on us for dinner." Pierce lowered his voice, but Kara could still hear him clearly. "The Acrelian delegation. Their ship needs major repairs. They'll be stuck here for at least 3 days, and they're already complaining about the accommodations." "What does that have to do with my diner?" "They're bored and hungry, and they've decided they want to try." Pierce made a face. "Authentic, human cuisine. We tried to arrange something more formal in the station meeting rooms, but Ambassador Zexteral insisted on visiting a real human eating establishment." George looked around his modest diner with its worn booths and simple decor. "Here, you want to bring Acrelian diplomats here?" "It wasn't my first choice," Pierce said. "But they're insistent. They'll be here in 30 minutes. As the men talked, Kara quietly continued her work. She refilled coffee cups and cleared empty plates. But her mind was racing. Acrelians. Here. After all these years. After what happened at the academy. "I'll need to close to regular customers then," George was saying. "Kara, can you put up the private event sign and help me tidy up?" She nodded, face calm despite the storm inside her. "Of course." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Customers were politely informed about the situation. Tables were rearranged. George rushed to prepare special items that might appeal to Acrelian tastes. Kara moved efficiently through it all, even suggesting a few adjustments to George's, recipes that might better suit Acrelian palates. When he looked at her questioningly, she shrugged. "I read a lot." Just as they finished preparations, the station's public address system chimed. "Attention all personnel. Please make way for the Acrelian diplomatic delegation. Maintain respectful distance and refrain from recording devices." Pierce, who had stayed to oversee the preparations, straightened his uniform and headed to the door. Remember, he told George and Kara, the alliance with the Acrelian Consortium is vital to humanity's standing. These are very important guests. Kara just nodded and adjusted her apron. The door slid open and they entered. 4 Acrelians, their tall frames making the diner seem suddenly smaller. Their scaled skin shimmered under the lights, patterns of green and blue that marked their high status. They moved with the fluid grace typical of their species, heads held high. At the front walked Ambassador Zexitaral. Kara recognized him immediately from her studies, one of the oldest and most respected diplomats in the Acrelian Consortium, also one of the most openly hostile toward humans. Behind the Acrelians came a few more station officials looking nervous. "Ambassador," Pierce said with a deep bow, "welcome to the Milky Way Diner, one of our station's finest establishments." Zexitaral's vertical pupils narrowed as he surveyed the space. "This is what humans consider fine dining? How quaint." His voice had the typical Acrelian rasp, but his English was perfect. "It's a traditional-style diner, Ambassador," Pierce explained hurriedly. "Authentic cultural experience." Indeed. The ambassador's tone made it clear what he thought of human culture. "Well, we shall endure this educational experience." The Acrelians were seated at the largest table. Pierce and the other officials joined them, tension visible in every human face. "Your server will be with you shortly," George said, then retreated quickly to the kitchen. In the back, he grabbed Kara's arm. "I hate to ask you to deal with them, but I can't leave the kitchen with these special orders." "It's fine, George. I don't mind. Be careful. Acrelians can be difficult. Just keep your head down, be polite, and don't engage too much." Kara smiled. "Don't worry. I know how to handle difficult customers." She grabbed her notepad and walked to the table with confident steps. Years of practice had perfected her waitress smile, friendly, but not too familiar. "Good afternoon," she said. "Welcome to the Milky Way Diner. My name is Kara, and I'll be your server today." Ambassador Zexitaral looked up at her, his expression one of bored contempt. A human female. How typically primitive, assigning females to serving roles. Kara's smile never faltered. "What can I get for you today? Our chef has prepared several options that might appeal to Acrelian tastes." As she took their orders, Kara maintained perfect composure, but inside memories swirled of another time, another place, of dreams crushed and a future changed forever. Little did the ambassador know that the simple waitress before him had once been destined to become his counterpart at diplomatic tables. And now she was serving him lunch in a space station diner. Life took strange turns sometimes. Kara moved between the tables with practiced ease. The Acrelian delegation watched her every move with cold, calculating eyes. Ambassador Zexitaral tasted his soup and made a show of considering it before setting his spoon down. "Acceptable. For human cuisine," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Station Administrator Pierce smiled with obvious relief. "I'm glad it meets with your approval, Ambassador." One of the other Acrelians, a younger female with bright blue markings, on her neck scales leaned towards Zexitaral. "This station is even more primitive than we were told," she said in their native language, not bothering to lower her voice. Kara kept her face neutral as she refilled water glasses. She understood every word, but they didn't need to know that. "Did you see their repair facilities?" Another Acrelian added in the same language. "It's amazing these humans manage to keep their ships flying at all. We'll be stuck here for days." The ambassador hissed softly, a sound that served as Acrelian laughter. "Perhaps we should provide some entertainment for ourselves while we wait. These humans seem very proud of their little outpost. It might be amusing to show them their proper place in the galactic order." Kara's hand tightened slightly on the water pitcher. She'd heard this tone before. It never led anywhere good. Lieutenant Samantha Wright looked up from her meal. "Is everything all right with your food, Ambassador? You seem to be having a private discussion." The ambassador switched smoothly back to English. "Merely commenting on your charming little establishment. Tell me, does this station have any cultural facilities?" Any place where beings might share their artistic traditions? Pierce looked confused. We have a recreation area where people sometimes perform music, poetry readings, that sort of thing. Nothing very formal, I'm afraid. Perfect, Zexaterral said. Perhaps we could arrange a small cultural exchange this evening. We Akrelians value artistic expression greatly. It would be interesting to see what humans on this station have to offer. The way he said it made his expectations clear. He expected to be unimpressed. He wanted to be unimpressed. That's certainly possible, Pierce said carefully. Though, with short notice, I'm not sure who would perform. Surely someone among your people has some talent worth sharing? The ambassador asked, his smile showing rows of sharp teeth. Chief Engineer Peter Doyle shifted uncomfortably. I play guitar a bit, but nothing special. And I used to dance, Lieutenant Wright added reluctantly. The ambassador's smile widened. Excellent. Then it's arranged. Tonight we shall exchange cultural performances. We Akrelians will, of course, demonstrate some of our traditional arts, and you humans will share yours. He looked around the table. Unless you fear such a direct comparison would be embarrassing for your kind. It was a challenge, plain and simple. Pierce couldn't refuse without losing face for the entire station, for all of humanity. We would be honored, Pierce said stiffly. Kara cleared plates from a nearby table listening to the trap being set. She knew exactly what would happen. The Akrelians would perform something technically impressive and deliberately complex. Then they would watch the humans struggle through amateur performances and use it as proof of human inferiority. She had seen it happen at the academy. It was a favorite Akrelian tactic. The delegation finished their meal, making more dismissive comments about the food and the station in their own language. As they prepared to leave, Ambassador Zexaterral suddenly turned to Kara. You, he said, pointing a clawed finger at her. You will attend tonight as well. Kara looked up, surprised. Me, Ambassador? Yes. Bring refreshments. Your presence will ensure we have a true cross-section of station personnel. From leadership, he gestured to Pierce, down to the most basic service workers. His smile was not kind. After they left, George emerged from the kitchen, wiping sweat from his forehead. Well, that could have gone worse. Pierce looked miserable. No, it's going exactly according to plan. Their plan. They're setting us up to look foolish. What do you mean? George asked. Lieutenant Wright explained. It's a common diplomatic tactic. Challenge the other party to something you know you're better at, then use their failure to strengthen your position in later negotiations. But this isn't a negotiation, George said. They're just here for repairs. Everything is a negotiation. With Akrelians, Pierce replied. And we're completely unprepared for this cultural exchange. None of us are professional performers. Kara continued cleaning tables, listening quietly. We'll just have to do our best, Wright said. I can perform a simple dance routine. Doyle can play guitar. Maybe a few others can contribute something. Against Akrelian performance art? Pierce shook his head. You don't understand. Their cultural traditions go back thousands of years. They train from childhood. We're going to look like children playing pretend next to them. George noticed Kara listening. What do you think, Kara? You seem to handle them well. All eyes turned to her. Kara hesitated, then shrugged. They want to feel superior. The actual quality of our performances won't matter. They've already decided what they'll see. Exactly, Pierce said gloomily. That evening, Kara arrived at the station's recreation area carrying trays of snacks from the diner. The space had been rearranged with chairs set in rows facing a small cleared area that would serve as a stage. Most of the station's off-duty personnel had gathered, curious about the visitors. The Akrelians entered as a group, their formal robes shimmering with embedded lights that reacted to their movements. They took the front row seats that had been reserved for them. Pierce stepped forward, looking nervous. Welcome to this impromptu cultural exchange. We're honored to share some of our traditions with our Akrelian guests and look forward to learning about theirs. Ambassador Zexaterral nodded graciously, but Kara could see the anticipation in his eyes. He was looking forward to this show of human inadequacy. The Acrelians performed first. One played a complex melody on a crystal instrument that created patterns of light as well as sound. Another performed a traditional dance, her scales shifting colors in rhythm with her movements. A third recited ancient poetry in the High Acrelian dialect, the formal language used only by their cultural elite. The human audience applauded politely, though few understood what they had witnessed. The Acrelians accepted the applause as their due. Then came the human performances. Lieutenant Wright danced well, but her simple routine looked basic compared to the Acrelian performance. Doyle played guitar and sang an old Earth song, his voice cracking on the high notes. A few others offered what talents they had, reciting Shakespeare, juggling, even a magic trick. Through it all, Ambassador Zexaterol watched with thinly veiled amusement. When the last human performer finished, he stood. "Most educational," he said. "Now we understand better the current state of human cultural development." He turned to his delegation, speaking in Acrelian. "Like watching primitive cave dwellers discover fire, is it not?" His companions hissed with laughter. Kara, who had been serving drinks at the back of the room, set down her tray. Something inside her shifted. 6 years of hiding. 6 years of pretending to be less than she was. 6 years of watching humans, being treated as lesser beings. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. She stepped forward. "If I may," she said clearly, "I would like to offer one more human performance." All heads turned toward her. Pierce looked horrified. George looked confused. The Acrelians looked amused. "The waitress wishes to perform," Ambassador Zexaterol said, switching to English so everyone could appreciate his mockery. "By all means, let us see what talents hide behind that serving apron." Kara walked to the center of the performance area. She smoothed down her uniform and looked directly at the ambassador. "I would like to begin," she said in perfect formal Acrelian, "with a traditional greeting to honored guests." The room fell silent. Even the humans who didn't understand the Acrelian language recognized something significant had happened. Ambassador Zexaterol's eyes widened, his vertical pupils contracting to thin slits in surprise. "Your accent," he said in Acrelian, recovering quickly. "It's from the northern provinces. Few humans even attempt our common tongue, let alone regional dialects." Kara bowed in the formal Acrelian style, bending precisely at the angles that showed respect without submission. "The northern provinces have always been known for their artistic traditions," she replied in the same language. "I thought it appropriate for this occasion." The young female Acrelian with blue neck markings leaned forward. "Who is this human?" she asked the ambassador. Zexaterol didn't answer. He was studying Kara with new intensity. "Continue with your performance," he said, switching back to English. Kara straightened and addressed the room. "I will perform a piece that might help bridge understanding between our cultures." She looked at the confused humans in the audience. "For those who don't speak Acrelian, I will explain as I go." She began with a simple series of hand movements, the beginning of an Acrelian formal dance. But she modified it slightly, incorporating elements that humans could recognize. In Acrelian tradition, she explained as she moved, stories are told not just with words but with the body. Each gesture has meaning. This movement, she curved her hands upward, represents reaching toward understanding. As she continued, she began to speak, alternating between Acrelian and English. She recited an ancient Acrelian poem about travelers meeting across vast distances, but she paired it with lines from human poetry that echoed similar themes. The Acrelians watched with growing confusion that slowly shifted to reluctant interest. The humans, seeing their reactions, began to realize that something extraordinary was happening. Kara's movements became more complex, incorporating elements of traditional earth dances while maintaining the structural elements of Acrelian performance. She wasn't just showing off knowledge of their culture, she was creating something new, a genuine bridge between traditions. "These two passages," she said during one sequence, "written thousands of years apart on different planets, both speak of the wonder of seeing new worlds for the first time. The Acrelian poet Zith Verrill wrote of eyes opening to unfamiliar stars, while the human poet Emily Dickinson described it as the spreading wide my narrow hands to gather paradise. She continued for 10 minutes, weaving together cultural references with skilled movements. By the end, even Ambassador Zex Teral was leaning forward in his seat. When she finished, Kara stood still and bowed her head, first in the Acrelian style, and then in the human way. The silence held for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, the ambassador stood and made the formal gesture of artistic acknowledgement, a rare honor even among Acrelians. That was unexpected, he said, his voice careful and controlled. You show unusual knowledge of our traditions. Thank you, Ambassador, Kara replied simply. Where did you learn our ways with such precision? He asked. It wasn't idle curiosity. Kara could hear the edge in his voice. Acrelians guarded their cultural practices closely. They didn't appreciate outsiders who knew too much about them without explanation. She took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been avoiding for 6 years. I studied at the Galactic Diplomatic Academy. I specialized in Acrelian cultural relations. A murmur ran through the room. The station personnel looked at each other in confusion. George's mouth fell open. The Academy, Zex Teral repeated. Yet you serve food in a diner on a remote outpost, explain. Kara met his gaze steadily. I left before completing my final year. Left? Or were forced to leave? There was something knowing in his question. Before Kara could answer, an older Acrelian in the delegation stood up. I recognize her now, he said. She was the human student who discovered the mistranslation in the Vexel-Terran Treaty, the one who wrote the paper on regional variations in Acrelian diplomatic protocols. Kara Summers, the ambassador said, the name clicking into place in his memory. Yes, there was some scandal, was there not? Accusations of cheating, academic dishonesty. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Kara's face remained calm, but her hands tightened at her sides. The accusations were false, she said evenly. Yet you did not contest them. The evidence was arranged very carefully against me. By the time I understood what had happened, fighting would have only made things worse. Lieutenant Wright stepped forward, confusion on her face. You were a diplomatic student, trained to work with the Acrelians? Kara nodded. I was top of my class, until several classmates decided I was making them look bad by comparison. They planted false evidence suggesting I had stolen research and cheated on examinations. And rather than defend yourself, you chose to serve food on a space station? Ambassador Zex Teral's tone made it clear what he thought of that choice. I chose to step away from a corrupt situation, Kara replied, and find a simpler life where I could continue my studies privately, without competition or politics. George had made his way to the front of the room. She's the hardest worker I've ever had, he said, looking at Kara with new understanding. Never complained, always reading during breaks. I knew she was smart, but this... Administrator Pierce looked stunned. You should have said something when you applied for the job. With your qualifications, I wanted to be left alone, Kara. Cut him off. I still do. But the ambassador wasn't finished. A human with your knowledge of our ways is unusual, and potentially useful. He studied her with calculating eyes. Our delegation has been having difficulty communicating certain needs to your repair crews. The technical terminology is challenging for most translators. I'm not a translator, Kara said. I'm a waitress. At the moment, Zex Teral agreed. But situations can change. He turned to Pierce. I request that this human be assigned to our delegation during our stay, as a cultural liaison. Pierce hesitated, glancing between them. If Kara is willing, I'm sure we can arrange. I have a shift tomorrow morning, Kara interrupted. George stepped in. I can cover it, or find someone else. He put a hand on her shoulder. Kara, this is important. She looked around the room, at the curious, surprised faces of her human neighbors. at the calculating, assessing eyes of the Akrelians. She had spent years hiding who she really was, what she really knew. Part of her wanted to run back to the safety of her simple routine, but another part, the part that had driven her to excel at the academy, the part that had made her step forward tonight, knew this might be her chance to reclaim something she had lost. "I'll help with translation and cultural questions," she said finally. "But I'm not rejoining the diplomatic corps. This is temporary." Ambassador Zex Terrell smiled, showing his teeth. Of course, temporary. But the look in his eyes suggested he had other plans. The next morning, Kara stood outside the Akrelian ship's docking bay. She had traded her diner uniform for simple civilian clothes, dark pants and a blue shirt. She felt strangely exposed without her apron. Lieutenant Wright stood beside her. "You really hid all that knowledge for 6 years?" she asked. "Why?" Kara shrugged. "It was easier that way." "But you could have had a better position, better pay." "I had peace," Kara said. "No one watching me, waiting for me to fail. No one trying to tear me down to build themselves up." Before Wright could respond, the docking bay doors opened. 2 Akrelian guards emerged, followed by Ambassador Zexa Terrell. "Ah, the waitress diplomat arrives," he said. His tone was still mocking, but there was a new undercurrent of curiosity. "Come, we have much to discuss." Kara followed him into the ship. The interior was as she expected, designed for the taller Akrelian bodies with higher ceilings and different proportions than human vessels. The air was slightly warmer and more humid than the station. It smelled of unfamiliar spices and the natural musk of Akrelian scales. They entered a conference room where 3 other Akrelians waited. One was the young female with blue neck markings. Another was the older male who had recognized Kara. The third was new, a burly Akrelian with red-tinted scales and the mark of a technical specialist on his uniform. "This is Chief Engineer Vrex," the ambassador said. "He has been attempting to explain our ship's needs to your station's repair crews, with limited success." Vrex glared at Kara. "Your technicians lack basic understanding of proper engineering principles," he said in Akrelian. "They insist on using inferior methods." Kara responded in the same language. "Perhaps a clearer explanation of your specific requirements would help. Technical terminology can be difficult to translate accurately." Vrex seemed surprised by her fluent response but quickly recovered. "The primary issue is with the quantum stabilization array. It requires calibration to exact Akrelian specifications." For the next 2 hours, Kara helped bridge the communication gap between Vrex and the station's repair team. She translated not just the words but the concepts, finding ways to explain Akrelian technology in terms the humans could understand. When they finally took a break, the ambassador gestured for Kara to join him near a viewport. The stars shone steadily against the blackness of space. "You are wasting your talents," he said without preamble. Kara kept her eyes on the stars. "That's my choice." "Is it? Or are you simply hiding because you were wounded?" She turned to look at him. "What do you want, Ambassador?" "I doubt you're concerned." "About my career path." He made a gesture that Kara recognized as a Akrelian acknowledgement. Direct. "Good. The truth is, your knowledge of our culture is impressive. More comprehensive than most human diplomats I've encountered. I had good teachers. And natural aptitude, clearly." He paused. "There is an upcoming summit between the Akrelian Consortium and the Human Alliance. Trade negotiations primarily, but with broader implications for regional cooperation." Kara felt a flicker of interest despite herself. "I've heard something about it. 3 months from now, on Centauri Station." "Indeed. The human diplomatic team is less than ideal. They lack true understanding of our customs. This creates unnecessary friction." She could see where this was heading. "I'm not a diplomat anymore." Clearly, his tone was dry. "Yet here you are facilitating diplomatic and technical exchange." The young female Akrelian approached them. "Ambassador, the communication link with the homeworld is ready." "Thank you, Mira." He turned back to Kara. Think about what I've said. Your talents serve no one in that diner. As he walked away, Mira lingered. Your performance last night, she said in a quieter voice. The way you combined our traditions with your own. It was innovative. Kara was surprised by the compliment. Thank you. Many of us younger Akrelians are interested in greater cultural exchange. The older generation remains traditional. Change is difficult across all species, Kara replied. Mira leaned closer. There's something you should know. Your name was familiar to me even before last night. Many students at our diplomatic academy have read your paper on regional dialects. It's considered quite insightful. Before Kara could respond, Mira hurried after the ambassador, leaving Kara with her thoughts. When she returned to the station later that day, George was waiting for her outside the docking bay. How'd it go? He asked, falling into step beside her. Fine, mostly translation work. She hesitated. You didn't have to cover my shift. Happy to do it. He studied her face. You know, when I hired you 6 years ago, I knew you were overqualified. Your background check said you had university education, but no specifics. I figured you were running from something, but you worked hard and kept to yourself. I respected that. They reached a viewport and George stopped. But watching you last night, that was something special, Kara. You lit up. I haven't seen that side of you before. Kara looked out at the stars. It felt good, she admitted. Using my knowledge again. Being recognized for what I know, not how quickly I can deliver orders. So what happens now? I don't know. The ambassador hinted that he wants me involved in some upcoming negotiations. George nodded. And do you want that? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Kara had spent years building a safe, predictable life. The academy had taught her that standing out made you a target. Yet last night, stepping forward had felt right in a way that hiding never had. Before she could answer, her comm unit beeped. A message from Lieutenant Wright. Emergency meeting. Station admin office. Now. When Kara and George arrived, they found Administrator Pierce, Lieutenant Wright, Chief Engineer Doyle, and several other station officials in heated discussion. What's happening? George asked. Wright turned to them. We just received a priority communication from Earth Command. The Akrelians have filed a formal request for Kara to join their delegation as a cultural consultant, not just during their TU. Stay here, but for the upcoming Centauri Summit. Pierce looked pale. This isn't a simple request. It's coming from their highest levels. Apparently, Ambassador Zexit sent a report about your performance and knowledge. That was fast, Kara said, surprised. Too fast, Doyle agreed. Something else is going on here. What do you mean? George asked. Wright crossed her arms. Akrelians don't change their diplomatic teams on a whim. They don't suddenly decide to include humans in their inner circles. They've refused human advisors for decades. So why now? Why me? Kara wondered aloud. That's what we need to find out, Pierce said. Because Earth Command has already accepted on your behalf. They've reactivated your diplomatic credentials and assigned you to the Akrelian delegation effective immediately. Kara felt the floor tilt beneath her. They can't do that. I resigned. I'm a civilian now. Pierce spread his hands helplessly. Apparently, there was a clause in your academy contract. In cases of special diplomatic necessity, former candidates can be recalled to service. This isn't right, George protested. She has a choice. Not according to Earth Command, Wright said grimly, and there's more. The Akrelians aren't leaving tomorrow as planned. They've extended their stay for another week specifically to work with Kara. Kara sat down, her mind racing. After 6 years of hiding, of building a new life, she was being dragged back into the world she'd fled, and something about it felt wrong. I need to talk to the ambassador, she said finally. Alone, Kara stood outside the ambassador's quarters on the Akrelian ship. The guards watched her with suspicious eyes, but allowed her to pass after checking her newly issued diplomatic credentials. Ambassador Zexit was reviewing documents on a large screen. He didn't look up when she entered. You moved quickly, Kara said, not bothering with formal greetings. Efficiency is valued in diplomacy, he replied, still not looking at her. Why are you doing this? Why force me back into service? Now he did look up, his vertical pupils narrowing. Force? I merely made a request. Your own government made it an order. A request with the full weight of the Acrelian consortium behind it. Kara stepped closer to his desk. You know they wouldn't refuse. The ambassador leaned back, studying her. You intrigue me, Kara Summers. Most humans who study our ways do so superficially. They learn our languages but miss the soul beneath the words. You are different. That doesn't explain why you're disrupting my life. Is it truly a disruption or a correction? He stood, moving to a viewport. I reviewed your academy records. Your papers on Acrelian cultural integration were remarkably insightful. Yet you abandoned that promise to serve food. I had my reasons. Yes. The accusation of cheating. He turned to face her. A false accusation, clearly. No one attains your level of cultural fluency through shortcuts. Kara was surprised by his certainty. You believe me? Of course. The question is why you didn't fight to clear your name. Kara hesitated, old pain surfacing. The evidence was well crafted. And the accusers were well connected. Their families had influence at the academy and beyond. So you ran. There was no judgment in his voice, merely observation. I stepped away, she corrected. There's a difference. The ambassador made a gesture of acknowledgement. Perhaps. But now circumstances have changed. Because you've decided I'm useful? Because the upcoming summit is too important for misunderstandings. He returned to his desk. The trade negotiations will determine relations between our peoples for decades. Yet the human delegation lacks anyone with true understanding of our customs and priorities. Kara crossed her arms. And suddenly, you care about successful negotiations? With humans? You've made your disdain for my species quite clear. The ambassador's expression shifted subtly. What I display publicly may not always reflect my private position. That caught Kara's attention. Politics within the Acrelian consortium were complex. Hardliners and moderates constantly vied for influence. You're not as anti-human as you pretend, she said slowly. I am a pragmatist. The future lies in cooperation, not isolation. But many in the consortium resist this view. I must appear appropriately traditional while working toward progress. Mira entered the room, carrying a data pad. She stopped when she saw Kara. Continue, Mira, the ambassador said. The analysis you requested, Mira said, handing him the pad. She looked at Kara. You came back. Not by choice, apparently, Kara replied. Mira's expression softened. For what it's worth, your work at the academy inspired many of us younger Acrelians. When it was discredited, she paused. Some of us never believed the accusations. The ambassador studied the datapad. Mira, show Kara the Rethus documents. Mira looked surprised. Ambassador. Those are classified. She has the clearance now. He looked at Kara. If you're going to be part of this delegation, you should understand what's truly at stake. Mira led Kara to a secure terminal in an adjacent room. She entered a complex code and documents appeared on the screen. These are internal reports from the consortium's Economic Council, Mira explained. Projections for the next 50 years. Kara scanned the information, her eyes widening. These show Acrelian markets entering decline without human trade partnerships. Yes. Despite public posturing about human inferiority, our economists recognize that isolation would be disastrous. The upcoming summit isn't just important, it's essential. And that's why he wants me there, Kara said, understanding dawning. To help bridge the cultural gap, to make sure misunderstandings don't derail the negotiations. Exactly. Mira lowered her voice. The ambassador is walking a difficult line. Too openly pro-human, and he loses influence with traditionalists. Too resistant, and the negotiations might fail. So he needs someone who understands both sides. Someone exceptional. Mira nodded. When he saw your performance, he recognized the opportunity immediately. Kara returned to the ambassador's office with new perspective. You could have simply explained this from the beginning, she said. Would you have believed my sincerity? He asked, or would you have suspected manipulation? Fair point. She sat across from him. But forcing me back into service wasn't the right approach. Perhaps not. For the first time, he sounded almost apologetic. We can be direct in our methods. Kara considered her options. She could fight the assignment, create diplomatic trouble, maybe even win her freedom. Or she could embrace this unexpected second chance. If I do this, she said carefully, it's on my terms. I want the truth about what happened at the academy made public. A formal review of the evidence against me. Already in progress, the ambassador said. I made it a condition of our request for your services. Kara hadn't expected that. Why would you do that? Truth matters in diplomacy. How can we trust a system that allows talent to be suppressed through deception? She wasn't entirely convinced by his altruism, but the outcome aligned with her interests. I have another condition, she said. When this summit is over, I decide what comes next. No forced assignments. Agreed. He extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement, something rare for an Akrelian. Kara shook it, feeling strange mixture of apprehension and possibility. 1 week later, Kara stood in the station's docking bay. Her few belongings were packed in a single bag. George, Lieutenant Wright, and several other station personnel had come to see her off. I still can't believe this, George said. My best waitress off to shape galactic policy. Kara smiled. I'll come back to visit. Maybe even pick up a shift when I'm in the sector. You'd better. He hugged her awkwardly. I'm proud of you, kid. A message came through on Kara's new diplomatic comm unit. The Akrelian shuttle was ready for boarding. That's my cue, she said. Lieutenant Wright shook her hand. What you did here, showing up that arrogant ambassador, making him see humans in a new light, that matters, it changes things. I hope so. Kara shouldered her bag. As she walked toward the shuttle, she saw Ambassador Zexiteral waiting at the entry ramp. Beside him stood Mira and 2 other young Akrelians. Ready, Diplomat Summers? The ambassador asked, using her new title for the first time. Kara looked back at her friends from the station, then forward to the new path opening before her. 6 years ago, she had fled from injustice, finding refuge in anonymity. Now she was stepping back into the light, not as a victim, but as someone who had earned respect on her own terms. Ready, Ambassador, she said, and walked up the ramp with confidence. Behind her, she heard George tell someone, That's my waitress, the one who stunned everyone. As the shuttle departed, Kara watched the station grow smaller through the viewport. She had come to Outpost 7 to hide, but she was leaving, to stand in the spotlight again. The journey ahead would be challenging, but this time she was prepared. They had come to shame her, but left in awe, and in doing so, changed not only her future, but potentially the future of human-Akrelian relations for generations to come. Sometimes, Kara thought, the most important diplomat in the room is the one nobody notices until the moment when it matters most.